I have a hard boundary, a hard stop at 6 p.m. In fact, I use automatic lighting in my office so that the lights actually go off, the computer shuts down, everything shuts down at 6 p.m.
Hello, everybody. This is Jake Stenziano, host of the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast, the #1 multifamily podcast on iTunes, here with my co-host, filling in for the G-Daddy, the multifamily mentors protege, the J-Bird, Josh Rusin. Josh, how's it going?
Jake, doing well over here, man. Super excited, making it happen on all levels. Actually, just getting back from a good conference and over the weekend in Vegas. How are you doing, Jake?
Always making it happen, big man. We have a very special guest. Today we have Michael Hyatt. Michael is the former chairman and CEO of Thomas Nielsen Publishers. He's also a best-selling author and entrepreneur. So without further ado, Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jake. Good to meet you. Josh, good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
It is our pleasure. Happy to have you here. So I want to get into a little bit about the personal. Can you share a little bit about your journey and how it's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I spent most of my career in book publishing. So I got to be the publisher of people like Dave Ramsey and John Maxwell and Marcus Buckingham and a bunch of personal development people, and really, really enjoyed that. I was the CEO of Thomas Nielsen Publishers for 6 years, and then we sold the company to HarperCollins. When I assumed the helm there, we were a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange, but in 2011, we sold it to HarperCollins, and I saw that as an opportunity to do what I always wanted to do, which was to write and speak full-time. Since that time, I've published 4 books, all of which have either been on the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, including my most recent one, Free to Focus, which was a #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller.
Wow. So you're writing books, you're out there, you're making it happen. What else is it that you're doing?
Well, I would say the most important thing I'm doing is raising a family. So I've been married for 40 years. I've got 5 daughters, grown daughters. I've got 9 grandchildren. And the way I like to think of it is I want to help people. First of all, I want to model this, but to win at work and succeed at life. So I'm one of those guys that believes that, I can have it all if I really get the focus that I need. So give an example. Last week, I run an 8-figure business that's my own company with 40 employees. Last year, our business grew 62%.
Ooh.
Yet I took 160 days off last year. That includes every weekend and 11 weeks of vacation where I didn't think about work, didn't talk about work, didn't read about work, didn't do any work. So to me, that's kind of the essence of sustainable scalability, when you can win at work and succeed at life. And that's what I'm after.
Josh, it does not sound like anything that we do. So we have a lot to learn here because we are grinding, day in and day out. So this is a very good opportunity for us to learn something here. So let's dive into that a little bit. What were some breakthroughs on productivity practices? Because I'm going to tell you right now, Josh and I, day in and day out grinding, we don't get that kind of time off. So you got to enlighten us because we have a lot to learn, obviously.
Well, I start this in the first chapter of my new book, Free to Focus, but I talk about getting a productivity vision. And so often when people think about productivity, they think, well, I want to be more productive. Why? So I can do more, because they think that the way to achieve more is to actually do more. I take the opposite approach. I think you achieve more actually by doing less and taking advantage of constraints, but you got to be clear on what productivity is for. From my perspective, and what I argue in the book in the first chapter, is that productivity should lead to more freedom. The problem with a lot of guys that get into business for themselves, probably guys in real estate too, is they think, I'm tired of working for the man. I'm going to get into business for myself. And they wake up, their dream becomes a nightmare when they realize that the most oppressive boss they've ever had in their life, the most demanding boss, the most unreasonable boss, is themselves. And they don't have any freedom. They're slaves to a job, slaves to a business now that they can't leave, that doesn't run on its own. So to me, I talk about in that first chapter about 4 freedoms that we got to get crystal clear on. First of all, the freedom to really focus. So many of us are so distracted today. Focus is a superpower. The ability to concentrate on your highest priorities, to do the deeper work, the most creative work that really matters. That's a strategic advantage. So that's the first freedom. Second freedom, to be fully present. You know, when you go out to a restaurant and you see some couple sitting there with their heads in their smartphones instead of being present with one another, or you go to a meeting and the people that are in the meeting that are supposed to be paying attention, you have to repeat yourself more than once because people got their heads in their smartphones. They're doing email, they're catching up on reading, whatever in the midst of a meeting. So the freedom to be fully present is one of the advantages of having true productivity. The freedom also to be spontaneous. So that if Josh calls you, Jake, you know, in the middle of the day and says, hey, what are you doing? Let's grab a cup of coffee. You don't have so much scheduled and no margin in your life. You want to be able to drop what you're doing and be available to your friends and your family. And then finally, and I love this one, I learned this last year when my wife and I were in Italy for a month doing nothing. They have something in Italy called the sweetness of doing nothing. And it's in those moments when we're not so overprogrammed, when we're not hustling, when we're just free to dream and think and create. Those are the times when we get the business breakthroughs, the creative breakthroughs that take our business to the next level. So I'm after freedom.
So you have some wildly competing thoughts in the business world. You have, you know, guys like Jeff Bezos over here saying that I get paid to make 2 to 3 very good decisions a day. And then you have guys like Grant Cardone over here, the 10X rule. I got to grind 24/7. And the only way I'm going to get ahead is by doing more. Who's right?
Well, think of it this way. Constraints actually help us achieve more. So I don't know when was the last time you had a vacation, but let's just assume that you've had a vacation recently and think back to how productive you were on the Friday before you left the office to go on a vacation where you're going to leave Saturday morning. Now, I just recently did that. I took my family to the Turks and Caicos. That Friday before I left, this was about a month ago, I was insanely productive. Why? Because I had a constraint. I knew that the plane was leaving tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and I wanted to be on it. My whole family was going to be on it. I needed to be on it. So I was wildly productive. I didn't get sidetracked by social media. I didn't get involved in frivolous discussion. I stayed focused on the most important stuff. Well, what if we did that every day? So here's what it looks like for me. I have a hard boundary, a hard stop at 6 p.m. In fact, I use automatic lighting in my office so that the lights actually go off, the computer shuts down, everything shuts down at 6 p.m. So what that means is that in the middle of the afternoon, I'm not checking social media. I'm not getting involved in, sort of this fake work that doesn't actually move the needle forward in my business. Same thing on the weekends. I don't drag my work into the weekends. I use that time to rejuvenate. You know, there is nothing more important to your productivity, and this is why guys like Elon Musk are wrong in terms of how much they're working. The science just doesn't support it. But when you work like that, constantly trying to sleep 4-6 hours a night, you're not your most focused. You're not your most productive. Nothing enhances your productivity like rest, sleep, rejuvenation, time away from work. And that's why, I don't work more than 40 hours a week. My employees don't work 40 hours a week. We discourage that because we want them to be highly productive at work, but we want them to rest when they're not at work.
So you're getting me there. And I will say this, that when I do, take myself out of my current environment and I do go on vacation, I do go somewhere, the ideas start flooding and the creativity comes back. So I will definitely say in my own experiences, I've seen that and the benefits of stepping away. So that's a very interesting point that you bring up there. People are busier than ever. And, a lot of people seem overwhelmed. You're touching on it right now. Why is that?
Well, there's so much competing for our time today. I remember when the first smartphones were introduced. I mean, whether it was the iPhone or something else, people thought, oh my gosh, I've got this incredible supercomputer in my pocket. It's got email, calendars, social media, all this other stuff. And yet, has it really led to more productivity? No, I think it's led to sort of an environment that I call total work, where people are always on, where the expectations with your clients and your customers that you always have to be always on. And yet all the science, the research shows the rule of 55. After you work about 55 hours, your productivity plummets. It starts going backwards. Have you ever been really tired trying to read maybe a paragraph in a contract you were negotiating, or a paragraph in a book, or trying to listen to your wife talk or a friend talk? And you go, could you repeat that? I missed it. It's because you're tired. When you're rejuvenated, when you're fresh, you're fully present. You're bringing the best of you to that situation. And most of us don't give ourselves a chance to do that because of all the distractions. And you think about the social media companies, these are multi-billion dollar companies who have one mission. In fact, their entire business model depends on this. And that's hijacking your attention, repackaging it, and reselling it to advertisers. This is at war with productivity.
Yes.
So we've got to control our social media usage if we're going to be truly productive.
What I've done personally is I get up earlier, and the work, like you're saying, reading contracts and the work that takes a lot of mental focus, I'm eating that first, because I find that, throughout the day, you just get hammered with all this stuff. So I find that front loading that stuff has really helped. Gonna get into the book a little bit. What inspired you to write Free to Focus?
Yeah, well, I've been teaching this to my clients for a number of years. So Free to Focus was first a live event, and then it became an online course. And so I got the input of thousands, tens of thousands of people who'd been through the course. And I realized what a game changer it was, because it was exactly the opposite of what's being taught so much in our culture. In fact, one of the big ideas in the book, I talk about the daily big three. And I've been talking to my clients, on average, they have about 15 items on any given day that they have to do. So get this and see if this doesn't resonate. They get up in the morning, they're automatically overwhelmed because they know that they're playing a game they can't win. They've got 15 items on average that they got to get done, and they know that they're not going to get those done. Maybe every once in a while, in a blue moon, they'll get them done, but rarely. Then even if they do 7 to 8 of those, they go to bed defeated because they realize how much was left undone. So one of the strategies I teach in the book is the idea of the daily big three. Now, you're familiar, I'm sure, with the Pareto Principle that says that 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. If that's true when it comes to tasks, to the items on our to-do list, then that means if we have an average of 15, then 3 of those are really kind of outsized in terms of the results that they'll deliver. 3 of those are going to move the needle. 3 of those are going to lead to the accomplishment of an important goal. So I set myself up for a game that I can win. I teach my clients to do this, and I teach this in the book. So identify the 3 important tasks. They could also be urgent, but they've got to be important. They've got to be related to a quarterly goal, or they've got to be related to an important project. Identify those 3 tasks, and then that gives you a focal point for sure. So you're playing offense. Now I'm focused on getting these 3 things done. And when you get those 3 things done, you count it as a win. If you get some other stuff done, awesome. That's just, plus. But stay focused on those 3 things.
Sounds like a lot of planning and organization to make sure you get to that point. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, Michael, so question for you. So I feel like you're speaking to me when I hear all of that, right? So let's say I have 15 on the list. I pick my top 3 rocks. Those other items, do I delegate? Do I let them fall by the wayside? Or, say, hey, maybe they're not important and just let them go?
Yeah, well, let me answer that in a couple different ways. First of all, in chapter 2, I talk about something called the freedom compass. And this is the secret to achieving more by doing less. You've got to have a compass that points to true north. Now, on the freedom compass, true north is what I call your desire zone. This is where you make your biggest, highest contribution. This is where you really drive the results. This is where your passion and your proficiency come together. So the things you love and the things you're really good at. It doesn't mean that these things are easy. Sometimes this is the most difficult work, but it's the work you were designed to do. That's your desire zone. So that's true north. South is your drudgery zone. This is where you have neither passion nor proficiency. You don't like this work and you suck at it. You're not any good at it. Yeah. Now, it's different for everybody, but I have an executive assistant, Jim, and the stuff that's in my drudgery zone is in his desire zone. So I hate managing my email inbox, hate managing my calendar. I don't like booking travel. Anything administrative, I don't love and I'm not good at. Fortunately for me, Jim eats that stuff for breakfast. He loves that stuff. That's in his desire zone. But I got to know what's in my drudgery zone so that I can release that to stay focused in my desire zone. There's 2 other zones. One is your disinterest zone. That's true east, where you don't have any passion, but you're good at it. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners caught in this, where the stuff that's bringing in the bacon, the stuff that they're spending a lot of time on, they're really good at it. They just don't love it, and they're bored. Then there's the distraction zone. That's true west. That's where you really enjoy it, but you're not very good at it, and you go there to hide from the real work, the work in your desire zone that would move the needle. So for me, for a long time, I'm kind of a okay web developer, but not that great. I brought my website down a number of times, but I like to go there to escape from the real work of growing my business. That's your distraction zone. So here's the key, and this is a long answer to get back to your short question, Josh, and that is that the key to achieving more by doing less is getting rid of everything outside of your desire zone. And first of all, that's a journey. That's why this is a compass. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can do that through elimination, automation, and delegation. Those are the three strategies I talk about in the book to get rid of all that stuff that populates our task list, our to-do list, but doesn't really drive the results in our business or in our life. That's why I'm able to take off 160 days and still grow my business by 62%.
It's really incredible. So there's a few things to unpack here, because when you're really diving into it, it is something that we look at as reverse engineering. We have L10s, and what we do is we put our yearly goals, and then we put our 90-day goals. This was something that we got from EOS, and then we have our weekly. And to me, it sounds a lot like you're taking the most important stuff and being okay with doing that and moving the needle, versus just trying to, get everything. And then maybe some of the harder stuff that will move the needle is getting missed because you're doing this other stuff that's not so important. Is that fair?
Yeah, totally. Again, it's the Pareto Principle. It's what's the 20% that's going to deliver 80% of the results. If you're focused on that and your team's focused on that, you will be able to scale, and you'll be able to do it in a sustainable way. The reason why a lot of these people are advocating hustle, whether it's Elon Musk or Gary Vaynerchuk or a number of those, and I'm not trying to judge them, but I'm just saying look at the results. Elon Musk is a good example. He says that you need to be working 80 to 100 hours a week. In fact, he often works 120 hours a week. He's been known to sleep on it in his sofa at his office at Tesla. But, and again, I'm not trying to judge him, but he's been married and divorced 3 times. He's gone through a health crisis. He was smoking weed on the Joe Rogan show, which is probably not the best judgment for a public company CEO. And he got fined by the SEC $20 million and had to step down as the chairman of Tesla. Why? I think because he's overworking. He doesn't have good judgment. He's not taking care of him. And you can't take care of your business like you need to unless you take care of you. It starts with self-care.
So where do you find other productivity systems going wrong?
I think very simply, and probably one of the most popular ones out there, is Getting Things Done. Are you familiar with that? By David Allen. Sometimes it's called GTD. But
no, I haven't heard of that one.
That was a book that came out in 2001. It's probably the most famous one of all. That book has sold almost 1 million copies. And it's great as far as it goes. David's a friend of mine. I've used that system. But here's the problem. There's no filter. And here's what I mean by that. He teaches, and a lot of people teach this, if you have a thought that pops into your head, you're aware of a task, that needs to go on a list somewhere in a trusted repository so that you can retrieve it later and make sure that it gets done. I've talked to my clients who have had hundreds of items on their to-do list. They're just overwhelmed by all the stuff that has to get done. Here's the problem. There's no filter. If an idea comes in, a request via email or a phone call, they think they have to do it. To me, the freedom compass is the filter. First question I ask, is that in my desire zone? Do I love doing that kind of work? Am I good at it? If it doesn't meet those 2 criteria, if it's not my desire zone, I respectfully decline, or I figure out a way to automate it, or I figure out a way to delegate it. And delegation is probably the most underutilized strategy for scaling, and yet it's essential if you're going to grow your business.
Why do you think entrepreneurs have trouble delegating and letting go of tasks? Why is that such a big issue?
Yeah, I think it's because they have one of 3 sentences that are rattling around in their head. And I hear this all the time. Somebody says, if I want it done right, I've got to do it, what? Myself, right? And they say, well, it takes longer to explain it. I might as well just do it, what? Myself. Or they say, I can't afford to hire anybody else right now. I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. As long as the answer to those 3 questions is myself, you will not scale. As soon as you eat up your 168 hours, you're done. You can raise your fees perhaps. You can try to generate more per hour, but you're basically done. Here's the truth though, and I consider those limiting beliefs, but here's the truth. What if it were possible that you could hire people that were so well qualified, that were truly working in their desire zone, that not only could they do it as well as you could do it, but they could do it better than you could do it, maybe even better than you could imagine it. Now, I've got a company full of those people. So for example, when we put on a conference here in Nashville where I live, I don't see anything in that conference till I walk in the day before for a sound check and a run through. And it always exceeds my expectations. Why? Because they're in their desire zone. They're doing it better than I could imagine it being done. Second issue, yes, it does take longer to explain it the first time, but then you start to reap the investment. That's why you've got to see it as an investment the first time you explain it to somebody. Once you explain it, once you get them up to where they need to be, then you've reclaimed all that time of doing it yourself. And then the whole thing about I can't afford it. Look, I get it. It's an investment. And when I left Thomas Nelson Publishers to start my own company, I was really hesitant. I was overwhelmed by all the administrative stuff. But I said, I've got to bill more time. I've got to be doing stuff that produces revenue for my company. So I hired a virtual assistant for 5 hours a week. That lasted 2 weeks. And I was able to reclaim that 5 hours a week and use it for billable time. I could bill it out in consulting. Then I went to 10 hours a week and then to 20 hours a week. And I've never looked back. Every time I've added somebody, made the investment, it's always a little bit of a stretch. I've found that I'm able to do the higher leverage stuff that keeps my business growing.
Nah, you see it day in and day out. Free to Focus has 3 phases: stop, cut, and act. Stop seems like an unusual step for boosting productivity. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's, when we think of productivity, we want to get going, right? Start, get in the game, make something happen. But what I say in that first section of the book, and that's 3 chapters, we've talked about a couple already, but is we've got to stop and just get off the hamster wheel, stop the madness, get off the hamster wheel, and ask ourselves the question, where is this going? And how can I set myself up for sustained success? So that's where I talk about formulating a vision for productivity, evaluating where you are in terms of that freedom compass. Are you working in your desire zone? Or are you spending a lot of time doing stuff that others could or would do, and you're not spending the time on, sort of the best and highest use of you? And then I have a chapter in there called Rejuvenation, which is all about this idea of rest, having the right nutrition. If you look at the world of professional athletes, people that are extreme athletes, here's the thing, they sleep more than you and I do. They take better care of themselves in terms of nutrition and exercise because they know if they're going to produce at the highest levels, at the world class level, they've got to spend time on intentional rejuvenation. So I talk about that in that first section on stop.
So, I'm really trying to understand how to beat these distractions. Do you have tips on how to, get out of your own way? Because that's really what I'm trying to get my head wrapped around here.
Yeah. So a couple things on that, Jake. First of all, you've got to have a daily focus. And that's where the big 3 come in. Having a daily focus where you're focused on 3 and only 3 things that are your big deliverables for the day. That's kind of your offensive plan. A lot of people try not to be distracted without that plan. And it's like me saying to you, do not think about pink elephants. Well, you're going to immediately start thinking about pink elephants. So you've got to have a positive focus, something that commands your attention. And in psychology, they call this sublimation. So we have 3 and only 3. Then you got to have a defense plan. And there's a couple things there. And one of the things is to kind of quarantine or isolate your email, Slack messages, if you use Slack for internal communication, and social media. So I teach 4 specific daily rituals. And this is something I also learned from the world of professional sports. World-class athletes start preparing for a big game the night before. They've got the specific ritual that they go through that sets them up to win. Well, in business, we can do the same thing. So I teach a morning ritual. So I have a specific set of activities that I do every single morning that set me up to win. Number 2, I have a workday startup ritual. So I'm not checking email all day long. I'm not checking social media all day long. I'm taking 30 minutes at the beginning of my day to get that stuff out of the way, and then I'm not going to check it for a long time. Now, I will check email, for example, immediately after lunch, but I'm not checking it constantly all day long. I don't even have my email program loaded all day long. Then a workday shutdown ritual, go through basically those same things so that I can button up all my work and go home and be fully present to my family. And then an evening ritual where I set myself up for a great night's rest so that I can be fresh the next day and really crush it the next day.
That's great. So you have an overwhelmed leader trying to do the Elon Musk, get everything done. What's the best tip or advice you could give someone like that?
Yeah, what I would say to them is establish a hard boundary as to when your day is going to end. This will make you more productive than anything else. If you're racing against the timeline, you will make choices about your priorities that you won't make if you think, if I don't get done with this, I'll just drag it into this evening. I'll just work from home. Or if I don't finish by Friday, I can do it on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon or whatever it is. When you establish boundaries, all of a sudden you experience the force of that constraint. That's the difference basically between a fire hose and a swamp, is a constraint. It gives focus to your work. So that would be my first tip that I would give to somebody that was overwhelmed is, I know it's counterintuitive because you think, oh my gosh, I just need to work more. Here's the problem with that. We convince ourselves that the situation is temporary. I mean, how many times have you done this? You say to your wife or your significant other, you say, hey, look, I know I'm working like crazy, but it's only temporary. Here's the problem. That temporary situation gets followed by another temporary situation and by another temporary situation. And pretty soon it becomes a lifestyle. And that's when people go have a health crisis, have a relational crisis, blow out their most important relationships or their health. And that boomerangs right back into your business. So if you want to destroy your sustainability, that's what you need to do. Just don't have any hard boundaries.
He's saying, burn the ships, Josh. It's a hard stop at 2:30, and then we're going home playing video games. That's it. That's really good stuff. All right, gang, let's take a quick time out to hear from our sponsor. Gino, I know a lot of our listeners are wanting to take their multifamily investing business to the next level. I know that you've been hard at work helping Jake and Gino students do just that using our framework. Can you explain to the listeners how they can get our help?
Guys, we've been hard at work growing our community of like-minded investors, and the results of our members has been nothing short of incredible. We're looking to grow this amazing group. What we're looking for is those who want to follow our proprietary framework that we've created. Buy right, manage right, and finance right. Leverage our connections, education, and mentorship as ways to take your business to the next level.
So if you're interested in finding out more about how you can become a part of our amazing community, apply to work with us at jakeandgino.com/apply. All right, and we are back. I know Josh has some really good personal development questions we want to take a dive into here. So Josh, take it away.
Yeah, Michael, so I want to learn a little bit about you. What's your favorite book, besides obviously yours, that you've read?
So many of them, but one of my favorites is Greg McKeown's book, Essentialism.
Why?
It's basically very similar to what I teach. In fact, Greg endorsed my book. But it's very similar to what I teach in the sense that we need to focus on the essential things that drive our life and our business forward. And so it's very parallel to what I teach. Another book that I also love, could I have two?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Cal Newport is a professor of computer science at Georgetown University, and he's got a book called Deep Work. And he argues much the same thing. He's also one of the guys that endorsed my book. And he's a guy that talks about the importance, the strategic edge that this gives you in business when you can do the kind of deep creative work where everybody else is distracted, everybody else is doing the shallow work. You're able to do the deep work and what it takes to get into that state of flow and do that kind of deep work.
Nice. Definitely like that one. What about biggest tip overall for success for the listeners?
Don't settle for winning in one sphere of your life. Your life is multifaceted. It's not just all work. Certainly, I want to kill it at work. I want to make a ton of money. I want to make all the money I possibly can make. But at the same time, I want a rich family life. I want to be in the best shape of my life. I want to be winning on all fronts. So yeah, that'd be my biggest tip. Don't settle.
I like that. A well-rounded life, right? What about, usually we ask, somebody in real estate, their best deal. What about you've done best deal over your whole career?
Yeah, I would say it was probably selling Thomas Nelson Publishers. This was amazing when the deal happened. So we sold the company for 12 times, I don't know if this will mean anything in your world, but 12 times our annual net income, or we called it EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, all that
Making
stuff.
some bank, Josh.
So it was a big deal. We sold it for $500 million. And it was, at the time, it was the highest, the biggest deal that any publishing company had ever sold for.
Breaking records. Absolutely.
That'll buy you some free time.
Yeah, that helps.
Very cool. Michael, how about this? You shared a lot of great knowledge here. I mean, how can the listeners get a hold of you? Where can they get your book and where can they find you at?
Yeah, well, the book, Free to Focus, which there's a copy of it, but the book can be found at better booksellers everywhere. Probably Amazon.com is the easiest way to find it, but it's at Barnes & Noble. It's in airports. I see it everywhere. It was number 1 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, so it's out there everywhere. But here's the cool thing. If once you buy it, you go to freetofocusbook.com, all you have to do is enter your receipt number, no matter where you bought it from, and that will unlock a whole bunch of free bonuses for you, hundreds of dollars worth of free bonuses that'll help you implement this stuff faster and easier than you could on your own. So again, that website link is freetofocusbook.com. Everything else, I have a weekly podcast that I do called Lead to Win, and you can find that on iTunes, but everything related to my work is found at michaelhyatt.com. You and I were talking offline, Josh, about my coaching program, which is called Business Accelerator, and that's for business owners, but you can find out about that at businessaccelerator.com.
I have to ask, best habit, because we dove into it a little bit, but you're obviously a very high performer, been super successful. What is your best habit on a daily or weekly basis that's led to your success?
Well, the first thing that popped into my mind is reading. Like, I consume voraciously a lot of content, but honestly, the best practice, the best, most helpful thing I've done over the last 8 years now is daily journaling. So I have a practice, and when my wife suggested this, it scared me to death because I didn't like looking at a blank sheet of paper, even though I'm a writer. I was like, what do I put? Do I put my deepest, darkest, innermost thoughts, or do I recount what happened the previous day? I just didn't know. So I came up with a list of 8 questions, and I've got it in a product called the Full Focus Journal, which enables people to do this, answer these 8 questions every day. But here's why that's given me such an advantage. It allows me to process what I've learned the day before. So I don't just, refuse to learn from my past. And sometimes you do want to repeat the past, but a lot of times we inadvertently repeat the past because we haven't learned from it. So by journaling, it gives me a chance to kind of get clarity. There's this really famous saying that I love that says, thoughts disentangle themselves passing over the lips and through pencil tips. And there's something about writing that forces me to get clarity, to process my experience, and here's the key thing, to distill wisdom. Wisdom is a strategic advantage. There's a lot of foolishness out there, a lot of people advocating foolish things, but wisdom is the essence of taking your experience, your success, and your failure and distilling those into lessons that can serve you for the rest of your life.
You're knocking me down here, okay? You got to repeat that. The fingertip thing. That was just like, there's a beautiful rhyme there. Say that again.
Yeah, thoughts disentangle themselves, passing over the lips and through pencil tips. And the reason that's important is clarity creates acceleration. So when you're clear on what you want, where you're going, what your goals are, it creates acceleration. And when you're not clear, it slows down. It's like putting the brake on your business and on your life. So that's why for me, a journaling practice, and I've got more about this on my blog, you can read about it at michaelhyatt.com, but why journaling is important, but it gives me the opportunity to gain clarity daily.
Josh, I'd have to repeat that, for like 20 days in a row, 20 times in my head to nail that. That was beautiful. And it made a lot of sense. It was a double banger there. So give us an example of the journaling in the way you did. You hit a roadblock today, you wrote about it the next day, and then therefore you were able to kind of go over it again and then put maybe some things in place so it doesn't happen again. Is that sort of the idea there? Because this is very interesting.
Yeah. So I have a series of 8 questions. So the questions are, in fact, I've got the journal right here, but let me just give you, the first question I start with is what happened in the past day? Now, some people like to journal in the evening. Personally, I like to journal in the morning when I'm fresh because that gives me perspective on yesterday. Maybe I'm a little bit too tired when I'm doing that night. So what happened yesterday? So I'm just going to recount the events, and that forces me to revisit what I did yesterday. Secondly, I love this question. What were my biggest wins? So here's the problem with entrepreneurs and high achievers. They focus naturally on the negative. Where did I miss? Where did I come short? What didn't go right? But it's a skill that you've got to learn if you want to build confidence and if you want to sustain momentum. You've got to focus on what you're winning. You've got to acknowledge where you're coming up short. But I always start by acknowledging where I was winning yesterday. It focuses me to dive deep, even in a really crappy day, and find some places where I won. What lessons did I learn? Was there at least one lesson? I always try to find at least one lesson that I can distill from the day that I can take forward. Then what am I thankful for? You know, gratitude is such a key. So many people talk about this. Tony Robbins, a lot of people talk about the power of gratitude. And so I try to identify 3 things that I'm thankful for. How am I feeling right now? I'm one of those guys that as a high achiever, I suppress how I'm feeling, and it could create problems later. So I just try to assess, hey, how am I feeling about stuff right now? Am I okay? Just an opportunity to check in with myself. What did I read or hear? So I try to read something every morning, and I want to take just some nuggets, some distillation of something I read and record it in my journal. What stood out? So what was it that I read, and what did it mean for me? And then finally, what can I do next to move forward on one of my goals? So those are the 8 questions. If people are interested in pursuing this, it's called the Full Focus Journal. You can find out more about that at fullfocusstore.com.
I'm going to pick up one of those. I think that sounds like a great way to reflect and then shift gears and really take a deep dive into what's going on. Because as entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's speed and we're moving extremely quick. But if you don't take time to reflect and really change when things go wrong, you're going to keep doing the same mistakes over again. So I think that's a great way to take care of that. So this has been a great episode. Really appreciate having you on. And for the listeners out there, get on, subscribe to Michael's podcast, go on, leave a review, give us a thumbs up. Josh, anything else today?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, there's a lot to gain. Sometimes I think in slowing down, you can speed up. That was my biggest takeaway.
Michael, you a meditator?
I am.
Yeah, I had a feeling. That the focus and the clarity comes through the silence, right?
I use an app called One Giant Mind.
Yeah.
And I recommend it to everybody. It's a great app that kind of, directs you, walks you through the process.
He might be pushing me away from Headspace here, Josh. We'll see what happens.
I used to use Headspace. And it's good too. No problem with that at all.
Very cool. Michael, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.